What strategy will Russia use to cope with the aftermath of the invasion of Ukrainian territory? The question now is whether Putin's $130 billion in gold will be enough to stave off Western sanctions. Is Putin constructing a protective economic wall around the country? Welcome to YouNik Economy Channel, a place where you may learn about current events and geopolitical and economic problems covered by YouNik. An invasion of Ukraine would have disastrous economic implications for the whole world, as the West has repeatedly warned Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin, on the other hand, appears to have been planning for the ramifications of Western sanctions for many years. The Russian economy is unlikely to suffer a substantial effect from even the most severe Western sanctions, according to industry professionals and analysts. Putin has also been making attempts to modernize and strengthen the country's defense. In the years leading up to Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea, the country's defense budget had increased to $90 billion. Putin is likely to boost the amount spent on defense, which is now more than 4% of the country's GDP. Russian government debt to GDP is about 18%, which is lower than Ukraine's almost 80% in 2016, however, it was reduced to 50% and now jumped back to 60% as of 2020 and, according to Trading Economics, it is expected to remain the same over the next few years. It is worth noting that, in 2020 US government debt to GDP was 128%, and even though it is expected to drop going forward, but not less than 120%. This is a substantial difference between Russian and US government debt to GDP ratio. As a result of its exclusion from the SWIFT financial system, Russia, in association with China, has made measures in recent years to minimize the negative repercussions of this decision. Because of the Russian Federation's 2014 annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, Russia has been wary of the West's use of the SWIFT messaging system against the country. Due to this impending threat to the country's financial system, Russia developed its own payment system, SPFS, to serve as an alternative for the international payment system SWIFT. Russian economy would suffer significant economic implications if the restriction were to be imposed, notably in the field of cross-border transfers. However, all domestic purchases may be done via the national payment card system rather than through the Visa or MasterCard networks. After falling to a historic low of $2 billion in gold reserves in 1995, Russia has seen a huge increase in its gold stockpiles. A Russian Boeing 777 airplane, carrying 20 tons of gold worth $840 million, is reported to have been filled with Venezuelan gold in the year 2019. According to media sources, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is increasingly substituting gold for the dollar in the country's commercial transactions. According to estimates, Russia's gold reserves are expected to reach more than 2,400 tons by the year 2022. Russian gold is reported to be second only to that of the United States, Germany, and Italy in terms of total reserves. Russian export revenues are sufficient to fund 17 months' worth of Russian export revenue at the moment, thanks to record central bank reserves of $640 billion in Moscow. Because of the increase in oil prices, it is anticipated that the stockpile will continue to grow. The export of crude oil amounts to around 5 million barrels per day, while the export of refined petroleum products amounts to 2.5 million barrels per day. Approximately 10% of total global crude oil exports are accounted for by Russian oil exports. In terms of international trade value, Russia exports 23 billion cubic feet of natural gas every day, which amounts to around $400 million per day. Over the course of many years, Russian President Vladimir Putin has attempted to de-dollarize the country's economic system. Consequently, many believe that Russia's fossil fuel income can no longer be measured in petrodollars. In 2013, Russia got US dollars for 95% of its total exports to Brazil, India, South Africa, and China, with the remaining 5% going to other countries. Some academics, on the other hand, say that, as a result of de-dollarization, just 10% of Russia's trade is currently performed in dollars. According to industry analysts, Russia's central banks have been successful in keeping the country's official currency, the ruble, constant at 0.013 per US dollar. The Russian ruble has recently experienced an 8% decline in value as a result of Moscow's military buildup in Ukraine. The billion or maybe trillion-dollar question is this enough? Putin, on the other hand, may not have foreseen the most severe actions now being discussed. Possible sanctions like complete blocking on Russia's major banks could jeopardize Putin's whole plan. It would become difficult to use Russia's currency reserves to sustain the ruble and keep living standards high in Russia under these conditions. If President Biden follows through on his threat to stop all dollar-based transactions with Russian banks, this would severely restrict the capacity of these institutions to do business overseas. In the general circumstances in an economic war-like situation, importers would not be able to pay their overseas vendors, and revenues for exporters would dry as they would not be able to sell to the open market. In certain circumstances where basic essentials are imported, it would struggle to meet basic demand. This is where Putin's all plans may fail to defend from Western sanctions. If those sanctions are involved with technological exports from the United States, it would seriously surprise Mr. Putin. As a result, Russia would be unable to build cutting-edge industrial or military equipment. The way it's able to put into effect might prevent Russians from buying cell phones or other consumer goods altogether. The West is faced with a conundrum. Does Putin continue to push on despite Western threats revealing the weaknesses in his economic armor because he thinks the costs are worth enduring or because he feels the West's threats are empty? Russia's economy is so huge and intertwined with the rest of the world that such drastic measures would be nearly unheard of. The governments of Western nations, which are currently dealing with economic hardship, would undoubtedly be harmed by larger shocks. However, the Kremlin seems to be preparing for the worst. It was only last week that Russia's central bank ceased utilizing extra oil proceeds to purchase dollars. Putin could not realize how vulnerable he still is, creating the chance that he might plunge Europe into war as well as the economic strife aimed to prevent it. Putin's closest circle may just be giving him what he wants to hear because they are overconfident. However, it is only time that will tell if the Kremlin is prepared for anything that may come its way. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give a thumbs up, leave a comment, and, if you haven't done so already, click the subscribe button to keep up with the latest videos and updates.